Morning. This is the September. Are we open?
Chair Hirsch, let me quickly just start the live broadcast. I will let you know. I'll give you a signal when
Okay.
we can start. Just a sec.
Check down below.
No, it's now needs a password.
We need a password.
Recording in progress.
Whoa.
I don't, hello. Go ahead and start it.
I'll bring it back. But we can start.
Okay. So good morning. It's the September 15th, 2022 meeting of the ARB. Could you call the roll, Medina?
Chair Hirsch,
Here, present.
Vice Chair Baltai,
Present.
Board Member Thompson absent, Board Member Chen,
Present.
Board Member Rosenberg.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Board Member Thompson isn't on Zoom.
No, unfortunately, she's got a migraine this morning, so she won't be joining us.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Right, so let me read the required piece here. Pursuant to AB 361, this meeting will be held with an option to attend by teleconference or in person. Members of the public may provide live public comment by submitting a speaker card prior to the start of public comment on that item. Speakers may address items that are not on the agenda during the oral communications portion of the meeting. Spoken comments via computer or smartphone will be accepted through the Zoom app. To address the board, go to zoom.us/join. Meeting ID is 965-6189-1491. When you wish to speak, click on raised hand. To offer comments using a regular phone, call 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 965-6189-1491. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, hit 9 on your phone so we know that you wish to speak.
Chair Hirsch, I have not received any speaker cards. I see 3 attendees in Zoom, but no one has raised their hand yet.
Okay, thank you. Are there any agenda changes, additions, deletions?
Sorry, were you asking about agenda changes? Okay, sorry, that was my fault. No changes at this time.
Okay. How about city official reports?
Yes, Medina's trying to do 2 things at once right this second, but we will get those slides up in a second here. So the first one will just be the yearly calendar. It shows that we have our regular meetings scheduled. And then the second item, you'll see that currently we do not have anything scheduled for October 6th. So I'm double checking with my staff, but pretty 90% that hearing is going to be canceled. I will send you an email in the next day or two to confirm that. And then you have, after that, you have the running list of pending projects. So if you want to do some early homework, that's the list to work off of.
Mhm.
We also had,
Jody, hold on
Yes.
just 1 second. Have you added to that list from the September 1st meeting, or are there new projects on there?
I don't, if I have, they'd be at the very bottom there. I don't know that I have for this particular one. Yeah, well, I don't think any large projects have maybe come in recently, but probably with the next hearing, I'm sure there'll be more. So, and we also had two of our pre-screenings were at council on Monday. And my computer has closed on me.
Oh, no.
So if you wanted to, that may be some research as well, if you wanted to hear what council said about those two pre-screenings.
Oh, yes.
And then we also had, as part of the Home Key project, I was at Planning Commission last night talking about a comp plan change to the Home Key site. The very tip of the parcel has a conservation land designation. So that needs to be changed so that we can fully utilize the site for green waste. So, oh yes, thank you, Medina. She was just showing me that 70 Encina Avenue and 4345 El Camino, those are the two pre-screenings that went to council recently. So, thank you.
We don't include the description of those in our booklet then, huh?
They both, I was putting pre-screenings in here. So let me take a look. Yeah, so 70 Encina is on packet page 9. And then the 4345 El Camino is at the bottom of packet page 9.
Okay. Yep, and they're called pre-screenings. Mhm. Okay, thank you. So that takes care of official reports. Sorry. Oh, my. So what, Peter, do you want to?
One should let the staff introduce.
Okay. Oh. Yes. So let's have a report on the study session.
We need to read the introduction. We need to read this.
Okay, yeah. The project that we're going to review today is the quasi judicial 824 San Antonio Road. Request for preliminary architectural review to allow the demolition of existing commercial building and construction of a 4-story, approximately 30,746 square foot private residential care facility with 15 independent senior dwelling units, 1 private owner's unit, 9 assisted living units, and an 8-bed skilled nursing facility with underground parking and ground level resident amenities, plus approximately 6,268 square foot ground floor commercial space. Environmental assessment, not a project. The formal application will be subject to California Environmental Quality Act review. Zoning district is a CS commercial. So Emily, would you like to?
Yep, I will pull up my presentation. Good morning, board members. This is the preliminary review presentation for 824 San Antonio. This project is located near San Antonio Road and Charleston Road. As you can see from the map here, it's also close to the border with Mountain View. Everything to the rear of the project essentially is within the city of Mountain View. The existing building is currently a boxing gym. Prior to this, it was a nursing school, and this is the building that would be demolished. Adjacent uses include the Hertz Automotive and a gas station. Across the street, there are offices near Fabian Way. This is a preliminary application that will be followed by a formal ARB application. And so you may consider preliminary feedback relating to the objective design standards, scale and mass of the building, transitions in scale to the adjacent properties, relationship to the overall neighborhood, pedestrian orientation, vehicle access, and other items related to your typical purview. As a reminder, this project would have the option as a mixed-use housing development project to go through the objective design standard process. As we will discuss later, the project as proposed today doesn't meet every single objective standard, so it is possible that it would still go through the traditional process. But as a reminder, if it is able to meet all the objective design standards, then in addition to this preliminary meeting, there would be one ARB study session when they submit their formal application. This project is also currently proposing to use the Housing Incentive Program, HIP, benefits to propose a higher floor area ratio than would typically be allowed in the CS zoning district. And so the project overview is to build a new 4-story mixed-use building. This includes 15 independent senior units, 9 assisted living units, and an 8-bed skilled nursing facility. The site plan shows that the skilled nursing facility is on the ground floor as well as a small retail component. This is in the CS zone, and as I mentioned, is using the HIP incentives. This includes, I'm also showing here the 2nd and 3rd floor plans. The 4th floor has the same footprint or layout as the 3rd floor. And this is where the both independent and assisted living units are kind of mixed together between the 3 floors. This shows the elevations. What we are looking at here on the bottom is the front off of San Antonio. The upper elevation is the south, which is courtyard shaped, as you saw on the floor plans. And so there are additional green screens kind of reflecting that this area is also where there are a couple protected redwood trees. And so the architect has designed around that to highlight that space. Overall, the materials include exposed concrete on the ground floor and then stucco and wood screens on the upper floors. The overall height is 50 feet. And this shows the other 2 sides of the building. Key considerations, again, since this is an HIP project, it has higher floor area than is typically allowed in the CS zoning district. In terms of the objective design standards, this does not meet the build to line requirement. However, there's also a special setback along San Antonio Road. So the required setback is already 24 feet. The ground floor is set back to accommodate the drop-off zone. However, it's also possible to meet the build to line requirement by cantilevering the 2nd floor out over the 1st floor. So they would be able to maintain the usability that's currently shown on the ground floor. Additionally, it doesn't meet the contextual step back requirement since it is adjacent to 1-story buildings and would be the more than 20 feet taller than it. That would typically require step backs on the upper floors, but this is so that they can get the full residential density that they would like this project to have. And so the recommendation is to consider the proposed project and provide some preliminary comments. That concludes my presentation. The applicant, Jennifer Kretschmer of J. Kretschmer Architects, will be presenting via Zoom. Thank you.
Any board members have questions for Emily? Here.
I'd like to hear the architect's presentation first, if you don't, is that possible? Before I have any questions.
Others agree with that? Okay. All right, so let's Let's go to the architect's presentation.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Kretschmer. Just give me a second to pull up my presentation. All right, I hope you're all able to see my screen at this point.
Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Jennifer Kretschmer, Jennifer Kretschmer. I am the design architect for this project with my colleagues at Architects Fora, who are the architect of record for this project. And thank you for the opportunity to present San Antonio Senior Living Facility, our proposed development at 824 San Antonio Road, to you today. Our client approached us with the primary goal to design a senior living facility that would be enjoyable and include amenities that would meet her own dreams of retirement. This is a very personal project for our property owner. A few basic facts as we begin. The project comprises approximately 52,000 square feet on a 0.44 acre site. The proposed lot coverage is 56%, and the proposed floor area ratio is 1.93. There is a special setback of 24 feet along San Antonio Road and a 5-foot setback on the sides, 10-foot rear setback on the site. The site is zoned as commercial service and is part of this housing incentive program. Our program includes 16 independent living units. One of them is set aside for our owner, 9 assisted living units, and a 5-room skilled nursing facility with 32 underground parking spaces. The owner intends to provide transportation services for the residents. The program also includes amenities to enhance the lifestyle of our residents, which we'll explore in more detail on the floor plans. Another inclusion into the program is a retail space that would be open to the public and could provide resident-friendly retail such as sundries or potentially a salon. The current structure on the property is a retail office structure and currently has 1 tenant, a boxing and fitness gym. Adjacent neighbors include a gas station, 2 fast food restaurants, and the Hertz car rental automotive facility. The project extends the pedestrian clear path along San Antonio Road by 3 feet and will include an easement alteration to increase the public sidewalk area 12 feet and provide street trees to meet the new objective standard requirements. At the primary entry, we provide an exterior bench within the vehicular loading zone to provide a location for seniors to sit while waiting for pickup. This page shows the photos of the existing property and with the proposed massing superimposed over the photos. As you can see, there are some 1-story structures nearby. We will discuss the contextual step back requirement in a later slide. You'll notice that we did not, oh, sorry, it's this one. You'll notice that we did not step back the building mass over the upper floors to create that relationship with the adjacent buildings. We did this because the site was added to the housing incentive program area, and we expect that adjacent properties will be developed to maximize density. So we did not elect to step back our building now relative to a low-rise structure that has a high likelihood of being demolished and built up to higher density in the future. All right, underground parking. There will be 32 parking spaces in the underground parking area, covering more than the required parking for the use of the spaces in this structure. There will be accessible parking, EV charging, and van parking with EVCS spaces. There will also be 28 long-term and 6 short-term bicycle parking spaces on the property. The ratio tabulation for the bicycle parking is on our cover sheet. All right, the ground floor space is going to be composed of lobby, resident amenities, including a lounge, library, and coffee bar. Retail spaces are shown in blue on this page, and skilled nursing residential units are shown here in purple. The support spaces are in turquoise and are primarily located on the north side of the main level. Waste collection will be handled by staff so that residents do not need to traverse down to the waste collection area. On this level 2, there is a redwood reflection garden planned for residents, which preserves the 2 significant redwoods on the property. The rear yard open space is primarily reserved for staff and for skilled nursing. On the second floor, we show 4 independent living units shown in yellow and 3 assisted living units in green. We're stacking the independent and the assisted living on the upper floors. Amenities on this level include a communal dining room, resident gathering space to host private parties, and education for the residents. There's also a warming kitchen plan so that food prepared elsewhere can be heated and served to residents. There is a 1,864 square foot podium level garden on this level to take advantage of the views and the southern exposure. It's also oriented toward the 2 redwood trees. In addition, each independent living unit will have a balcony. And this view is towards the Santa Cruz Mountains as well. The third floor composed primarily of independent and assisted living units. And on this level, we will also include a gym. The top floor, the 4th floor, is similar to the 3rd floor, but with a community room for residents where stacked over the gym. And on our roof plan, we are showing a schematic photovoltaic area as well as the mechanical equipment and equipment screen. A few things I'd like to highlight on our building section. Underground parking and the ground floor level will consist of larger open spaces, while the upper 3 levels will consist of housing units that stack, with the exception of the 2nd floor dining room space, which has on the 3rd and 4th floor has independent living above that. The C-shaped design takes advantage of the southern exposure and views to the Santa Cruz Mountains. Sunlight is an advantage, we all know, for senior health, and keeps up their circadian rhythm, improves vitamin D and their eyesight. The building height is 50 feet measured at the parapet. All right, the overall design and choice of materials for this project is intended to appeal to senior residents who have lived a modern lifestyle. Our focus on using green, sustainable products with a concern on the carbon footprint leads to creating spaces that utilize natural and sustainable materials inside and out. Wood and plant covered screens are included to provide privacy and to soften the hard edges. Metal screens are also used with organic designs to vary the natural light. The owner wanted us to incorporate a strong sense of verticality into the facades to break up the typical horizontality we would see in similar types of housing projects. A focal point on the interior lobby will be something we're calling the cenote sculpture. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit to show you a picture of what is a cenote. And we're going to utilize it as an oculus to bring in natural light. It's in a very organic form. It's a resemblance to cenotes found in Mexico, a natural feature that inspired the property owner while traveling. All right. The objective standards incorporated in the project include facade variation. We vary materials between the publicly facing ground floor and the upper levels. We articulate the facade, our use of biophilic facade materials like the green screens and twisting wood slats, wood soffits, and the organic pattern in the perforated metal screens are informed by our client's desire to incorporate pattern and texture inspired by nature throughout this development. The datum lines are tapered balcony overhangs, and the primary entrance is clearly pronounced with a tapered overhang and is articulated with a textured screen. The ground floor has a high floor to floor height in respect to the ground floor retail height requirements, and the retail area has a transparent glazing facing San Antonio Road. On our north facade, the longest facade, a rhythm of solid and glazed portions meant to break up the massing. On an elevation, it looks pretty flat, but we're also, taking the elements and going forward and backwards to create more interest on this elevation. All right. Thank you, and that is the end of my presentation, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to provide this presentation. We look forward to hearing your comments.
Congratulations, Jennifer. You're right within the 10-minute limit, which is very impressive. All right. Thank you. Thank you. So now we'll go to some questions that we might have for you. Who would like to start that? Peter? Anybody? Speak up. Yep.
I have a list of questions.
Okay.
I always start. You want to go ahead? You go ahead, Angie.
Okay, thanks. I will just start. Thank you so much for your presentation. I have a bunch of questions. The first, maybe we can start with the basement. So first question is, I saw the bicycle storage room. So I want to know how the people can access from the ground level to the bicycle storage at the basement.
Thank you. Yes. Well, we have multiple options for accessing the bicycle storage. And again, this is more long-term storage rather than short-term storage, which will be located at the ground floor level. So people going in and out day to day will have a place on the ground floor level. With this level, you'll be able to access it through the stairwells, the elevators, as well as the entrance to the parking, but primarily through the stairwells, which will have access from the outside.
So do you mean like people will go with their bike, go along the reflection garden and use the stairway along the south elevation, along the south property line?
So the parking, the bicycle parking in the underground space, since they are long-term parking, it is meant for residents, staff, and those people will have access even through the lobby of the building.
Okay.
So they don't necessarily have to come directly from the outside.
Okay. My second question is, I saw there are a bunch of trees on the rear property line that need to be removed. So I wanted to know, is it because of the basement boundary that will affect the route? And
yes, that is correct. And although we show those trees on our existing site plan, most of those trees are small enough that they're not considered significant or heritage.
yeah, I saw there are also oaks and redwood trees along there. And also actually you provide more parking than required, right? So have you think about if you make the basement smaller and then it might save more trees along the rear property line?
From the front and back, we do have the ability to reduce the underground parking, but we did take that into consideration when we were looking at the overall design. The width of the site is very narrow, and in order to have the drive paths in the parking area for two-way drive so they can back out and back in. It's just not feasible to go any narrower on this particular underground parking.
Understand. And another question is at the front of the building. So you circle the area of the potential, the additional utility area along the street. So is there any thought at this moment for like the material you will use there and the height of the screening there?
Going to the front facade.
Well, if you go to the site plan, actually it's not on the facade. On the site plan, you call it out additional utility area just along the San Antonio Road.
Yes. Athena, do you mind
Yeah.
answering this
Yeah,
question?
in the past, we've provided plants to use as screening there. It's whether or not Palo Alto accepts that, I guess. But that's what the intention was.
And I'm sorry, let me introduce my colleague, Athena Carter from Architects Fora.
So have you considered any other places for the transformer location?
We have not, because that is the current existing location of the transformer.
I have two questions for staff. So I wanted to know about the fire access requirement for a property like this. Is a fire lane required around the building or along one side of the building?
So fire department definitely reviews all of our projects. We always consider the hoses from the fire department are 150 feet long. And so as long as they're able to, stretch a hose around a building, that's usually the requirement. There's also, sprinkler requirements and things of that nature. But I don't know, did we get any special comments from fire?
I can check. I don't have an answer at the moment. But again, this is a preliminary review and any formal application will be reviewed in higher detail for those types of questions.
Another question to the staff is on the upper floor along the north side, I saw the cantilevered balcony is extremely close to the property line. It's only 8 inches from the property line. So I wanted to know how it will impact the future development for the adjacent lot, because it will be extremely close. If there are other housing project there, then it will impact both the privacy issues to this subject property and the adjacent properties. I want to know if there is any requirement or thoughts from the city.
So that would be regulated through the building code. So I don't know that we got any special comments about that, but we can certainly ask them that question.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's all my questions for now.
I'll jump in if I can just continue. A few questions for staff, please. Emily, you'd mentioned before the build to line. Could you elaborate, please, what that requirement is?
So the CES zoning district has a build to line requirement in their development standards, and I am pulling it up so that I can give exactly what it states.
So yeah, it's generally a requirement that, in this particular case, we have a 24-foot special front setback, correct? And so we would want the building to be right on that 24-foot setback. But we do have allowances where if you want to push the first floor back, you could certainly do that as long as the upper floors are still at that 24 feet.
And the requirement is for 50% of the frontage to be built at that setback. It is worth noting that the property line is not exactly perpendicular or parallel to the building. but that doesn't change the 50%.
But it is
requirement.
nonetheless an objective design standard within the zoning code. So is this something that our objective standards would supersede? Or is this something that's going to be absolutely required regardless?
This is more along the lines of absolutely required because this is in the same development standards table where setbacks and heights limits are located.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a pretty hard requirement. Maybe unless we were able to make some DEE findings, but that would be difficult for such a thing.
Okay, thank you. My second question is regarding the setbacks required for residential uses. Do I remember that there's a 10-foot setback, or is that a different zoning district? I know you haven't done a full zoning analysis. I'm just trying to get to the meat of it here.
The interior side yard is for if it is abutting a residential zone district, and technically this abuts other CS zoned districts.
I see. So it's regardless of use, it's just the way it's zoned.
Yeah, and we do have most of that listed out on package page 17. Because we do say for the rear yard, there is the 10-foot requirement for a residential portion.
So in the rear yard, there's still a 10-foot required setback? Am I missing something? It seems that the drawings don't show that now.
There is an allowance for balconies to extend up to 6 feet into side setbacks.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. You had mentioned in your report that there's other objective standards that this would not comply with as presented. Could you say what those are, just in a general sense? I know we're the ones who just put those out, but just to refresh my memory, please. Or if you want to get back to me on that, that's fine too. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, sorry, I'm looking for my notes on that. And because what was included in the staff report was primarily specific notes.
Let me go on to my next question to Jody is regarding the on-street parking. When I was out visiting the site, I noticed that there's no on-street parking in front of this property. Do you know if that's going to remain that way?
I don't know that for certain. I would assume that's correct, but we can certainly check up on that.
Okay, it seems to me because it's close to the intersection, it stopped just in front of the Hertz deal, or the Hertz facility. Oh, yes. And the last question is regarding, I believe we have a new tree preservation ordinance or an updated tree preservation ordinance in town. And if memory serves, it now applies to all trees, not just oaks and redwoods. And I wonder if you could tell me if that's correct. It seems that there's a number of trees in the back that are fairly large, but not oaks or redwoods. And I would think that would be an impact for the applicant to know that. But do I remember that correctly, the new tree ordinance?
So the new tree ordinance definitely went into effect between when this project initially submitted and when they will do their formal. The formal application will be required to comply with the new tree ordinance. In Urban Forestry's initial review of this project, they reviewed it prior to when that went into effect. So that's not reflected in their review at this time.
But do I remember right that the new ordinance regulates activity close to all trees over a certain diameter, not just oaks and redwoods?
We'll have to take a second look at it, but the information that I have right now, it looks like there's 7 main trees that we're concerned about, whereas it used to just be oaks and redwoods.
Okay, so it's,
Now we've got, we've got several oaks now, different species of oaks. And then we've got a cedar and a maple tree. But those still have to be around 11.5 inches. It depends on the type. The redwoods have to be 18 inches. So, but we also have designated trees too. I mean, if there's any tree on an ARB type project can be a designated tree, and we can, ask for it to remain as well.
okay. I'm just looking at the survey seems to indicate a bunch of trees in the back, which I noticed, and some of them are 15, 16 inches. So it seems that it's worth paying attention to that. Okay, those are my questions for staff. Kendra, do you have anything? I had a few questions for the applicant too, but maybe you want to finish with staff first. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, a couple questions for staff here. Going back to the balconies, there was the comment, Emily, and maybe I misheard it, that the balconies are allowed to protrude into the side yard setbacks by up to 6 feet. Is that correct? So we've only got 5-foot setbacks here. So is that, I'm going back to
Yes.
Jinxi's, comment is an
Yes.
8-inch offset from the property line seems pretty minimal. So I'm just wondering, this seems kosher so far where there's no red flags coming up here with that outside balcony being so close to the property line?
Again, the building
have
that
to
they
review
need to
it.
meet building code because clearly the planning requirement is more relaxed in that regard.
Right, okay. Yes, okay, so just for staff. And then that build to the front line, will balconies accomplish that? So if they keep the front building facade where it is, but extend balconies towards that front setback line, would that actually comply with that build to requirement that we're looking to get out of them?
The balconies is not if it was all balconies, no. If it's some, combination, I mean, we can have some ins and outs. We really just want the feeling of the building to be up on that line. And so if there were, some solid walls, some balconies, a recessed for ground floor, I think we can deal with a combination. And that's kind of, for the ARB to help us judge as well.
Sure.
But I think if it was all balconies, it probably wouldn't meet the 50% either, because balconies would just be a portion of the facade. It wouldn't be a whole 50%.
And then on that same note, gosh, that thought as I'm saying it is running out of my head. Shoot, I can't remember. Sorry, it just flew right out of my head as I was talking. And my last comments were the trees we had there, the turnaround space into the entry drive. As there's no major parking, and this is sort of going back to the fire comments, and I know fire department hasn't reviewed it yet, but as there is no fire lane or fire engine turnaround, I'm wondering if the radiuses of going into this front driveway, do they need to comply with a fire engine being able to access into this space, or does the fire engine only need to get to the curb outside on San Antonio? I don't know if you guys can answer that right now, but just.
Yeah, I mean, that is going to depend on distances and length of the overall building. I can confirm that fire did not have any particular comments.
Okay. Because it's a tight turnaround, but I'm also looking at the radiuses going, fire engine's not going to clear that. But I don't know if there's something they could redesign to even make that possible. So just sort of questioning whether or not there needs to be a recess in the front or something so that they can get just a little bit closer out of just putting that thought out into the universe. Okay. I think that's it for me for staff for right now. Thank you.
So I was hoping, Chair Hirsch, to ask a few questions of the applicant as well. Is that appropriate enough?
Now's the time.
So to the applicant, Jennifer, I think it is. I'm not an architect of this type of building, but every time I've seen these or been involved in them, there always seems to be a greater amount of attention paid to the separation between the assisted living units and the independent living units. Here, they seem to be all lined up on a corridor with essentially no separation. Is that intentional to your client's desires? Or how would that work, do you think?
Yes, so the client's desires in adding the skilled nursing initially was so that residents didn't have to go elsewhere to seek some skilled nursing healthcare. With that said, when you utilize skilled nursing, it's probably also going to be utilized to outside patients. The separation that we chose is we did choose to put it more towards the back, and that there is going to be a separation through doors and walls to that area. The main corridor that goes through the back area that goes past the waste management and some of the other support rooms, that corridor is not intended for residents to be rented.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Don't want to be rude to interrupt you, but I'm asking more about the units on the upper floors where you have 3 assisted living units in the center of the building on each floor.
I'm sorry, I thought you were
Down the hall, you have the independent living units. And my understanding has always been that assisted living is a more substantial level of assistance. And those are usually in their own wing, their own division, on their own floor. And I'm asking here if this is intentional to mix them like this.
Yes, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were asking about skilled nursing. Yes, it was intentional to mix them this way. We did initially have some designs where we put all the assisted living on certain floor. There was a structural thought as well as to stacking units on top of each other. We checked with our owner and their requirements for assisted living and did not say that it would be any problem to have assisted living combined with independent living on there because the staff will be all within the same building. So yes, it was an intentional choice to mix them within the independent living.
Thank you. Second question is regarding the operation. Is the owner who will be living here also going to be operating this facility?
That is correct. The owner is seeking assistance with some providers, but she is primarily going to be the main owner of the property and continue to, provide all of the services through
Wonderful.
her own company.
That's wonderful news to hear people doing that. Lastly, sell me on this C-note sculpture. Is this a large vertical shaft through the building?
Yes, it's pronounced cenote. It is intended, it's going to be off of the roof garden area on the second floor. And it will bring in, like an oculus, bring in light into the lobby, natural sunlight. Its sculptural element will be able to be seen in the dining room and as well in the bar area located on the second floor. So it is intended to be an area of interest that brings in natural light and hopefully provides joy and something to, for the residents to say is very unique to their home.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you.
I'm going to jump back in here if that's okay. I've got some questions for the applicant as well, but I did remember my question for staff in regards to that front setback line. Will the applicant be required to actually follow the angle, or if they do a stepping and it touches, does that qualify? I'm just trying to gain some clarity for the applicant as they try and move forward with that part of their design process.
Yeah, I think given the odd angle, a sort of stepping would be acceptable. It depends by how much.
Sure.
And again, that's something for the ARB to help us with.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then for the applicant, I have some more nitty-gritty questions, if that's all right, if you'll humor me for a few minutes. The skilled nursing facility, is that really more of a hospital type setting or pseudo hospital setting where the residents are really sort of more bedridden? Could you explain that a little bit better?
Yeah, it is not intended to be long-term health care in the facility. It is meant for rehabilitation or for residents to step down and move into skilled nursing as their health changes. The owner, she actually works in senior care at the moment at the very hands-on level. And as we mentioned, this is a passion project for her. So she wants the facility to operate that as you come in when you're independent and healthy, that you wouldn't have to move out or go to another scenario because your health changes. Of course, she's not planning to have specifically memory care in this facility. So that might, up to a point, assisted living can help with memory care. But in general, the idea is that you're not going to get rehoused after coming here. So that's really, the skilled nursing is more like a support for the residents who need health care.
So would I be correct in assuming that maybe this is also an area to be utilized like post surgeries, things like that, where they maybe can't be in their independent living unit for a couple of weeks, but then they can stay here and then go back up to their own unit? Or is this, I hear you drawing the designation of memory care, and that was going to be my follow-up question. But sort of at some point, the residents, so they're basically going to go from independent living to assisted living to skilled nursing, and then they will at some point need to move out if their health deteriorates beyond that point. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, as well as what you were discussing or asking about is more like rehabilitation, and they would be able to do that as well. So if they, broke a hip, came back from the hospital, they could stay in the skilled nursing before going back up to their maybe independent living because their hip is now fine.
Perfect. And in this skilled nursing facility, are these sort of smaller rectangular rooms supposed to be designated as restrooms? Does each unit have a restroom?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then I also noticed that again, I'm sorry, these are some nitty gritty questions. The laundry facility is off of the nurses station here. I'm assuming that is just for the skilled nursing area. Are there laundry facilities for the rest of the units? Are they independent in the units? Is it one per floor? Because I didn't see that designated. Could you explain the laundry situation better?
The owner wishes to provide laundry service to all residents. So that would be a laundry service to the entire facility.
Got it. Thank you. I'm also questioning how you said that the outdoor open space in the rear is predominantly for that skilled nursing section, but I don't see any access to it. Could you clarify how you get there?
Yeah, this is quite preliminary. We are working on it. We've been discussing that with our team. And we do want it also as a space for staff.
Yep.
So that, when staff needs a break, they have a nice restful place where they actually don't have to help a senior at the moment. So that, they can also have some respite while they're working.
Got it. If I might be so forward as to give a 2 cents here, is that sort of central area seems like that SN number 2 seems like a nice area. Maybe you flip flop the staff in some of these rooms so that central area could be more indoor, outdoor with that bump out to be accessing that outdoor space. But again, I'm not trying to design anything for you, just food for thought. Okay, list of questions still. I've got a few more if you'll continue.
While you're pulling up that next question, may I address something you were discussing earlier about the balconies on the side yards?
Yes, please.
We understood the rules for the balconies that could extend up to 6 feet into a setback, but we chose to set that back 2 feet from the setback. So it's not 8 inches or something like that. We are keeping those balconies on the side yards 2 feet away from the property line.
Okay, because on RPA 6.3, 6.4, and 6.5, it does show them designated and even labeled as 8 inches from that property line.
Yeah,
so that's 2 feet and then a 4 foot 4 inches beyond that.
Yep.
Okay, so having a little thought on that as well. And I apologize, I feel like I'm sort of hogging the mic here. I will try and wrap up pretty quickly. As for the entryway, just going out to the exterior materials and sort of looking at that main facade, I really do want to commend you. I appreciate the redwood reflection garden. I think it's a beautiful space. I love the upstairs sort of balcony. I love that you guys are going to get some commercial in there. The concept of having a salon in there is a little personal for me because that's what my Nan always wanted, is having her salon nearby. So I commend you on that and getting coffee bars and sort of areas for the people here to utilize. So in that commercial space, that will be predominantly for the people living here, but will that be accessible to outdoor outsiders as well?
Yes, that is the owner's intent, is that it will serve the residents, but it will be some sort of retail that also the public can utilize.
Perfect. And then as for the front facade, I'm just going to focus on that and I'm going to wrap up my comments. That front facade, the articulation of the entrance specifically feels a little underwhelming to me. And I just want to put that out there as a comment as you guys are going to be redesigning this front facade to begin with, to try and meet that front setback that we're looking for, the build to line. But I feel that the front entrance for this residence specifically is a little bit underwhelming based on how your renderings are showing it. It sort of looks like this large vertical gray portion, and I can't really tell exactly where the entrance for this facility is versus the entrance for the commercial. So my just 2 cents on that is I might pay a bit more attention to making sure that the entrance for this unit is a little bit more celebrated Okay. And that's it for my comments. Thank you guys very much for allowing me this time.
Do you have any? Well, I don't have too much to add to what everybody's been asking here, which is very detailed. But clearly, it seems that the biggest obstacle here is going to be the front setback. And the way the plan works at the moment, there's a staircase right there. So do you have any thoughts about how you intend to answer that issue? Do you look for pressing for the design exception here as to the drop-off issue and the requirements for that versus the requirement for sort of a expanded plan for the upper floors then? Could you respond to some of that?
Yeah, so quite a bit of questions you just threw at me all at once.
Sorry.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the driveway aisle. I think that was one of your questions, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we definitely wanted a driveway space, and of course, fire did give us some comments, and fire had said nothing to us about the driveway aisle, and we have taken care of projects like this that only had access from the street with like a wharf fire hydrant. But going back to what you're talking about, yeah, the whole front entry with the driveway aisle is meant to have a drop-off zone for the residents. And we expect to utilize transportation. The owner wants to provide transportation to the residents so that they can just be dropped off and picked up right from there. There's going to be a seating area right out front, for pickup and a place for seniors to sit. Just a lot of the design of this project came from my own experiences in caring for my parents and even an uncle that I'm caring for right now for seniors. And so everything like thinking about, how far can a senior walk before they need to take a break? All of that has been incorporated into this project, and including how you pick up and drop off. Athena, did you want to add anything to his question on that?
The drop off? No.
All right.
No. But we did provide a seat in the front to allow for seniors to sit as well.
Okay.
There's a second part of that, which is considering that it is a requirement, a zoning requirement. Have you given some thought to what you would do to the plan that would alter it in such a way that it could answer that issue?
So that the upper floors meet the setback, meet the front setback, come forward and meet the setback is what you're asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because originally when our client came to us, she had this whole vision again about this being a place of joy and also being like going on a cruise. So quite frankly, some initial design ideas were very cruise ship looking. So I'm just saying that we could definitely look at incorporating that and creating a front facade that is a little bit more exciting per the other members' questions and comments. I don't see an issue with making some of those changes. One of the reasons that we chose to do what we've done right now is for the consideration of structural components, how things stack on top of each other, which would then reduce the cost to the owner on the cost of construction, right? Whenever you cantilever something out over another space, there's a lot of engineering involved to make that happen, which adds cost to the project.
Yeah, and also the entry is tapered as well, so it does project forward.
Yeah, I wish we had our other renderings that had kind of a side view to it, because the fins do come out and protrude and are not completely vertical. In fact, very few things on this building are actually straight up and down. There's also a component where they come out at you. And they just don't render as well on these elevations.
You can see it a little bit on PA 10.1 though.
Okay. Yes, I did notice that the balconies, for example, do that on each side. Do the vertical wood slats do that as well?
Yeah, the vertical wood slats are also, and if you can zoom in, I mean, maybe if I showed, well, I don't know. But anyway, the vertical slats are not completely vertical. We're actually taking the wood and twisting it slightly so that when you look at them, they'll look thin and then they'll look thicker and then they'll look thinner. So there's the fins coming out at the entrance. And so the wood slats are not intended to be completely straight up and down. They are taking the wood and twisting it so that it goes from thin to thick to thin to thick.
Okay, thank you. I would like a couple of additional comments here to responses. The commercial use of the ground floor, if it is going to be used by outside folks, are they getting there? How do they get there? Do they come by car? Do they go in the garage? Is the extra parking for commercial use of this building?
Yes, the extra parking is for commercial use.
Okay. Bike paths. Have you considered anything concerning a bike path on San Antonio Road? I know you've increased the sidewalk width, but how about a bike path? Is there any thought to that?
We love bike paths, but that would be in the public right of way. So, but we do have bicycle parking and we do have ways for people to bring their bikes on to our property.
Okay. So I think that everybody's had an opportunity to ask enough questions here. Anything to add to this? No?
Chair, if I may, I believe we have one member of the public that would like to speak.
Yes, okay. And we'll bring it back to the public. Let's hear.
Our first speaker is Nava Humberto.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Good morning, board members. Thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Humberto Nava. I'm a field representative with the NorCal Carpenters. And I just want to ask the applicant, is there's going to be any labor standards attached to this project? The great senior facility that is going to take care of our seniors, but I just had a question, is they're going to take care of the workforce and the working men and women that are going to be working on these projects? So just kind of throwing it out there if they haven't already thought about what kind of labor standards they have on this project. Thank you.
Not sure how we address it.
Yeah, I don't think that's for us to answer. I think that's for the applicant if they choose to answer.
Yes. Certainly not us. Would the applicant have any comment about that?
It's something we'll definitely discuss with the owner.
Okay, well, I think,
And
Yeah.
really quickly, we'd like to mention that we also received a comment via email. It's been printed out and you have it in front of you. It appears to be regarding traffic during construction, which again, the interface between a construction project and our public streets is something that we will take into consideration.
well, it's really not up to us to comment on that issue because certainly traffic will be, the construction job will be run according to the rules of the city. It doesn't seem we can speak to that.
Yeah, so our Public Works Department definitely does a logistics plan for construction. I think the comment is, saying that there's lots of construction on San Antonio. And so, which is correct. And so we'll bring that to Public Works' attention. I'm sure they already know, but we'll just see if there's any coordination we can do with the various construction sites.
Okay, so I think that everybody's quite satisfied with the answers that the applicant has made. I think we should now maybe come back to us to bring it to conclusion. So anybody want to start on that?
I'm happy to start, David. I have a whole list of comments to offer the applicant. Is that okay now?
Go right ahead.
So thank you very much for bringing this to us. It's an exciting project and we're pleased to see this kind of building going in, especially along San Antonio. I think your application is still in a preliminary stage, so please consider my comments similarly preliminary. I just have gone through and made a whole list of thoughts as I read this, as I look through it. So on the site planning, I wonder if you're overdoing saving the redwoods on the right-hand side of the property, possibly at the expense of not saving more of the trees on the back. I appreciate, and the city wants you to preserve these trees. At the same time, you're making an extraordinary change to your design with the whole middle C-section, pulling the basement back. Frequently, these trees don't survive this kind of construction. And so what you'll see from us, I think, as you get more serious is either really show us that this tree will survive and this is going to happen, or just be real serious about whether you want to save them or not and come to us with other proposals. I think the underground parking is excellent. It's essential actually in this project. So I'm really pleased to see you putting underground parking there. I think the front drop-off is also a good, even a necessary feature for a building like this, but I'm concerned that it pushes the building too far from the street. And I guess I'll bluntly say I want both. And so I think you need to find some way with your architecture, with your design, to bring the building forward more, which is going to mean some sort of cantilevers or overhanging parts of the building. And if you look at other projects that have been done in town, that's pretty much what people end up doing in any facility, like a hotel or like your facility, where you really need this drive to the front door kind of feature, which I think you absolutely need in this location. But just putting the whole building back there is not going to work, I don't think. So I want to be blunt with you that you're going to have to do something more than this. I'll also be blunt about the retail. I don't think it's going to work. You don't have any way for the public to come to that facility. There's neither street parking nor any sort of realistic parking underground. It's going to be very difficult for somebody to get out of that garage and get to the shop without going into the facility. And I just don't think retail will work in this location. Maybe I'm wrong and it will change, but lacking a larger vision from the city of what we really want to see developed there, you might succeed instead with some sort of a coffee shop or a restaurant type facility. But just calling a box retail and giving it such prime location, I think is not going to work. It's sort of naive at this point to just put that in there that way. So again, when you come back with a more serious full application, I think you really want to give more thought how that space is going to be used and integrated and serviced. And if it's open to the public, you need to show that. I think your open space is also problematic at the back right now. It's, as Board Member Rosenberg pointed out, it's sort of locked in only by going through your skilled nursing units, and yet the people in the skilled nursing are unlikely to go out into that open space. You're correct, your staff will want to use that space, but right now it just feels like an afterthought almost. It's due to the angled shape of the property and maybe the trees are back there. And I'd love to see you take better advantage, possibly pulling the building forward more and making a real space back there that staff or residents of the facility can use. So right now it's just not working. I'll shift on to my comments regarding the floor planning. In no particular order, but I think your bicycle parking just doesn't work. It's buried in the back of the garage. Really, you have to go up and down the ramp to get your bicycle in and out. These are senior citizens living here who maybe don't use bicycles as much, but when they do, you need to make it really easy for them. So the bike parking ought to be central to the front door, simple and easy to grab your bike in and out of. Really something that that can be celebrating a use of a bicycle, especially a bicycle by a senior citizen, but make it easy for him or her to actually use it. If your intention is for staff to park, I could see where maybe the bottom of the garage is fine, but it seems like an awfully large amount of space dedicated to bicycle parking that's not likely to be used. The idea that your senior residents are going to have multiple bicycles that they're storing long-term down there just seems out of touch. I doubt that would be the case. So I recommend that you work closer with staff to see what the real bicycle parking requirements are, and then look carefully at who your users are and create something that really meets that need. I think the same thing applies to the way you've done the trash bins on the side of the building. I think it would be very difficult for them to be serviced by the city. They like to bring their trucks up close to it. And here they have to walk back 50 feet onto the property while they leave their truck idling in the yard and physically carry these bins back and forth. That's often difficult to do. It's also located in such a way that, say, the kitchen trash has to be carried through the lobby of the building almost to get to it. Just seems that you haven't, I understand these are preliminary plans, but I'll encourage you to really think more carefully how you do it. A lot of times it's better to try to get it down in the basement and work with the city sanitation department to see if they can access it there, get it out of sight, bring it down on a service elevator of some kind. The location of your kitchen on the second floor is similarly problematic in that it's really prime street frontage space, and yet you're putting a kitchen there. It would be much nicer to have the dining area wrap around that frontage and put the kitchen at the backside of the dining area. I question your decision to mix assisted living and independent units, and I think it might merit more thought. Again, it's not for us to decide how to lay out the interior of your building, but it feels more to me like all of these units are a combination of assisted and independent living. And yet I know that the market really demands both, and I think that it demands that they be more separated. So I'm just recommending that you consider more carefully what you're really trying to do with the interior layout there. I guess it rubs me the wrong way also that the way it's laid out now, the assisted living units seem to be the least desirable, with really very poor daylight and access just on the north side of the building right up against the property line and no balconies, and that just sort of bothers me. But again, that's not really an architecture board issue, but I'm just pointing it out. I think your foundation should follow the structure of the building above it. You have that curved outdoor wall and that the foundation is squared off. It's a small detail perhaps, but it will affect how you lay out your basement. I question if your elevator sizes really will function, especially near the nursing stations and stuff. They seem small to me. Again, these are details, but I can appreciate wanting vertical elements in the building, but again, you've put your stair tower right at the front facade, which we'd like to see close to the street and celebrating the activity happening in the building. You might want to consider pushing that front stair tower further back, maybe next to the kitchen or something. I really love your second story courtyard. I think it's a wonderful feature. It's a great idea to lift it up, make it looking into the trees. It's really neat. What's going through my creative side as I look at it is, could you wrap that around to the front of the building somehow? Let the building cantilever over a second story courtyard that wraps onto the front of the building. It might be a really interesting feature. It's just worth thinking about. I'll address next the massing of the building. And I understand the structural desire to keep it stacked floors. However, almost every building we've looked at on San Antonio or El Camino, we really would like you to step the building a little bit more. Right now, it's really a box with applied elements, these angled fins and things like that. But ultimately, this feels too boxy to me. I'd like to see you give it more in and out, like I was suggesting, maybe wrapping the terrace or cantilevering the front to bring it closer to the street. I'm not sure how to react to the neighborhood compatibility issue. It's something we've been struggling with on San Antonio. We don't have clear guidance from council as to how this street should be developed, at least not yet. We've struggled with other buildings on the street, and generally, like the hotel up the street, we've asked them to step it down on the sides. Our objective standards do the same thing. At the same time, I agree with your statement. This is going to be developed into a street full of 4-story or 5-story buildings, and you have a narrow lot, so stepping it on the sides doesn't really work that well. So I don't have an answer for it, but I say that right now our standards require us to consider compatibility and being compatible with a one-story building is tough. And our objective standards certainly make it very hard for you. So I'm eager to hear what my colleagues think about that. I have to say, I don't fully understand the fins and screening elements that you're proposing to put on the building. Right now, they seem interesting perhaps, but also fussy, probably complicated. And I'm not sure if you're not just dressing up this box with some sort of modern architectural veneer rather than making it more an integrated part of the structure and the form. So I'd like to see more, really understand that. I caution you having full floor to ceiling height glass walls, especially facing the street, certainly in living units, that's often problematic. You want to really understand how you're designing that. I caution you that the north elevation of this building is visible as you come up San Antonio from 101 and the intersections there, and you want to really look at it from that angle and make sure the design is what you want. I can promise you I will be doing that as you prepare more complete drawings. I'll be going a quarter of a mile away and starting to look, what am I going to see? You're going to be a 4-story building or more in a backdrop of 1-story buildings. That elevation is tremendously visible. And even if in the end there will be more buildings, right now it's got to be designed carefully and well. Discussing your material selections, I don't fully understand your proposal. The basic feeling of what you're presenting seems interesting and possibly really attractive. However, I question if it's your fundamental statement. This is a facility for seniors who have lived a modern lifestyle. I find a bit disingenuous. I think certainly assisted care living, senior living should be buildings that are perhaps more comforting and comfortable rather than more cutting edge and dramatic. And I think you want to really think hard about your design vocabulary to accomplish that, or at least make a clear understanding, really make sure your client understands what you're trying to do here. For me, it's a little bit too much almost, but I just want to be sure you're understanding that. I think the buildings will fit in with other buildings along San Antonio. So it's from a compatibility point of view, your proposed architectural vocabulary works. I'm not sure it functions with your particular usage. I think you need to, if you could, when you come back to us with more presentation stuff, be more careful to get your plans more consistent. I notice a few places where the elevations and the plans, as best I can read them, are out of sync, and please provide us with more 3-dimensional imagery, especially from San Antonio Road. What will it look like? Too many times we end up cycling with applicants because they don't have good drawings for us. So please take the effort to show us what it will look like. It doesn't have to be photorealistic renderings, just accurate 3D imagery coming out of your computer model would be super great. So I'll end with my overall feeling is that you have a lot of small ideas of how you want to develop this project. Your C-note sculpture in the middle perhaps needs more development, the fins in the exterior, but I think your large scale partie of the project is missing. It's just a stacked box with fairly basic looking apartments inside it. And yet you have a very challenging program and a challenging site, some complicated zoning restrictions. I think you need a more developed basic partie of how you're going to break up the building. So I'd like to see if you could just give that some more thought. You possibly have some significant code issues to deal with between the zoning thing about having to come up to the street more. I think there's a number of building code things you need to work through. Then lastly, I'll close my comments by saying to the public or the city that this again reinforces to me our need for a more comprehensive plan for development along San Antonio Road. This is now the 3rd or 4th major project we've seen, and I understand there's quite a few in the pipeline. And we really don't have a consistent guideline to give applicants, the public, for us to use governing what to do with this project. And it's unfortunate to have us, everybody scrapping together, figuring it out, working as a reaction to project development rather than proactively deciding what we want this boulevard to be. So I'm just stating that fact. Thank you.
Who's next?
I'll jump in here because I'm going to echo a lot of Peter's sentiments. I agree with Board Member Balfe on quite a few of the very eloquent points he made. I do want to also take a moment to say thank you for bringing this type of project forward. We do need these facilities, especially with our aging population. We do need more passion projects like this being done where there's a personal element to making sure that this project is done right. That is very clearly a background running this project, and I do sincerely notice that and appreciate that. So first of all, I do want to say that there. Again, I feel like the overall party of this is a bit more of a decorated box than anything else. That cenote idea could really be utilized to a greater extent for the overall party of the building versus trying to keep a C-shaped cutout on a side. Now, again, this is sort of going a little bit backwards here because we are trying to save trees, and I understand that, but maybe a central courtyard is more successful than a side courtyard in this regard. And just, again, a comment for you to take it as you will. I would really appreciate seeing a better connection to that rear yard. Aging populations really do need to have movement, even if it's small movement, even if it's a walking path, being able to either connect that side yard to the back in a single path, or if you do change that up and have more of a central courtyard, having that connection to that backyard is critically important for an aging population. Getting in their walkies, right? Just even if it's just a couple of laps around, going through the trees, smelling the fresh air, getting the sunshine, really, really strongly encourage you to pay more attention to that indoor outdoor space and how that can be best utilized for an elderly population. I think that front drop off needs to be coming forward as well. I would definitely encourage you to look at hotel porte cocheres and sort of how they utilize those, cantilevering above, having some sort of coverage as people get in and out of the cars. Again, if it's a rainy day, we don't need our grandmas and grandpas hanging out getting wet. So having a bit of coverage there would be strongly encouraged. One thing I do disagree with is I think that the retail is a good idea. I think that it will vitalize this area and hopefully encourage more people to come by. Now, at the same time, and in the same breath, I'm going to say it is a hard site to access unless you are actually parking there and coming up. That being said, there's plenty of other places. I'm thinking of Coupa Cafe down by San Antonio on El Camino that also you have to go find a place to park and then walk back to the cafe. Doesn't stop me from going there because they have great coffee. So there's definitely solutions there. But I would just strongly encourage you to consider those solutions and what some of those answers might be. Pathing through the building, making sure that there's good signage, making sure there's good direction. I think that the use of those commercial spaces will be critically important to whether or not people come. Cafes, absolutely. A restaurant, great idea. Salon for the residents, yeah, that makes some sense. Now, having a yoga clothing store, probably not going to be so successful. So I would really strongly encourage that the thoughtfulness that you're showing with the rest of the project be considered when you're considering these commercial spaces, and that you're not just saying it'll be retail. Think about what that space should be, how to get more people outside in, how to best utilize it for the residents themselves. To go to the palette, I really struggle with the overall color choices here. I feel like the dark gray and the blacks are kind of depressing and that they are heavy. And on the comments of being more modern, yes, I appreciate modern architecture as much as anybody else, but this just feels a little kind of like a downer. And I think that a building like this with this type of clientele and this type of inhabitants would want a bit more joy and warmth. So as far as the palettes front, I would encourage a bit more of that, maybe a little bit less glass in the residential living areas as well. I think that the spandrel glass isn't necessary. And then my last comment would be in regards to the neighborhood compatibility and the stepping. I don't have a good answer for this either. There's a part of me that says you build to what you have, right? You can't necessarily build something thinking that the next building over is going to be something else, because that next building over might not get built for 20 or 30 years. That Hertz built little shed might stay there for the next 30 years. We just don't know. So there's a part of me that says you have to build for what's there today. On the other hand, I kind of agree that probably over the next 20 years, this entire stretch of building will be maxed out. So I don't really have a strong answer, but maybe we find a solution somewhere in the middle where it's not a straight box, but it's not completely stepped. Maybe we utilize balconies better on the sides. I would just encourage a little bit more thoughtfulness to that instead of a hard no. Maybe we find a step in that direction without being completely angled and stepped back. And that's it for my comments for today. Thank you again for bringing this type of project forward, and we look forward to seeing it again.
I will not take too much time and repeat what my colleague just mentioned about. I think they covered almost everything. And, and I think from your project, I can see the contemporary trend for senior living, I think, which is really nice. And maybe years later, it could be a trend for this type of style for senior living. And there are also lots of features I like for your project. I do like the reflective garden and the green wall and the wood material you applied for on the facade. I hope you can keep all of them. And color-wise, I agree with what board member Rosenberg just mentioned. I think, at least from our drawings, it seems it's too dark for senior living. And I read a study about senior living before, and I think it said seniors, the colors to the senior, as the senior age, the colors would appear more gray. And I hope lighter color could make this building more welcoming and inviting, and also maybe introducing more wood material or maybe green wall, I don't know, at the front facade at the first level to make it more human scale and more welcoming. That's all my question. Thank you.
Well, as usual, I'm at the end of everything here. So all of my opportunities have already been used up. I'd like to sort of summarize where a lot of the comments have led us to here. There's certainly concern about the rear property line and the trees in that area, which really will require additional study, and the space and how it is used, whether it is used specifically for staff, sort of separate from the residents. And they certainly have a wonderful area with the redwood deck area to congregate, and but recognize the fact that walking and appreciating the entire perimeter of the site would also be nice for them. And I wouldn't think that mixing with staff in the rear would be a bad idea. Fire access, you can work with the fire department, but one thought is that certainly a fire truck ought to be able to be pulled into the front of the area, but let's leave that to the fire department. The balcony along the north elevation is an issue to consider, the privacy of neighbors. Maybe you don't need that many balconies on this building. Not every area requires a balcony, or everybody. On the other hand, balconies are a nice situation that maybe you should keep it. So as long as you're within code, certainly that's okay. The build to line and the DEE exception, I think you're already on the road to finding another solution for the front of the building. And certainly I agree with Commissioner Chen that keeping it, utilizing materials that are friendlier, colors that are friendlier, colors that are, more inviting to all people, seniors, et cetera, would be a better bet for this building. The objective standards as you have to study these, because they will be applicable here, is something you'll need to work out with staff along with tree preservation. The assisted living separation issues, that's programmatic and something I think is between yourselves and your client as to how that is handled in this particular building. It's a small building, so that the individual decision here as to when one aspect of senior living as people go from one life cycle to the next is something that obviously you have been concerned about with the client who is interested in providing for both of those aspects, the present general capability of the clientele here. The commercial use, I agree with all of what has been said about that. To make it really work, you have to find a way to get people to the building, and it may end up that it's simply unworkable in this particular site. And, you know, in some sense, this really has to do with what Commissioner Bolte was saying, Vice Chair Bolte, about planning the whole neighborhood here, because we certainly have to think about how this neighborhood satisfies the needs of the whole neighborhood. And the commercial uses may be better in an area where a number of those commercial facilities would exist. As present, you know, we have Midtown, which is a little concentrated commercial area for that area, and et cetera. We have El Camino for some other neighboring areas. So in terms of the use of the commercial space, I think it's really questionable and probably better in some way that it is used by the tenants. Bike parking is a good questions have been raised concerning bike parking, making it easier to get in and out of the building for those who want to use a bike. I don't know how much seniors of this, whatever this age is, will be using bikes. I use a bike and I'm certainly a senior. So hopefully some will have the ability to get at their bikes much more close to the perimeter of the site in the front where you can get out away from the project. So that's service areas, and those issues regarding service really need some more study. I would agree that those need to be made convenient. And it's a problem because it's a very tight site and you have to squeeze an awful lot into this site. And I think you've done a pretty great job of that. And in terms of planning, clearly this building so far has been designed kind of from the inside out. And now it's time to turn around and design it from the outside in. And I think that coordination of textures and materials and colors will be more important as you proceed with presenting designs to us as it gets to official presentation. But it's nice that you are thinking in terms of very friendly, warm, cozy kind of materials that will make it an inviting building. It's not a coordinated effort yet. I would think that the internal program, which is pretty incredible for seniors, it has been guiding you very strongly here, but that the aesthetic issues of the perimeter are not solved yet. And indeed, somehow they leave it up to you to take it one step further and make the building work as a unified piece of architecture. I think that you have done it's a very exciting program. There's no doubt about it that considering senior living and the fact that we tend to, as a country, sort of warehouse our seniors in very unaesthetic and unattractive and buildings that don't have this amount of wonderful possibility, and that you're going to be sort of in the forefront of something that would be very nice for the future. Scale is small. It'll feel like it's personal to those people who live there. And it's an incredible idea. And I really take my hat off to the person who has decided to put this project out there. Thank you.
To the chair, if I could, I wonder if we couldn't try to give the applicant really clear guidance on two issues that I've heard that are potentially really a design factor. One is the extent to which we want them to comply with the build to setback in the front. It requires big design changes. I think my feeling is that we just need to tell them what the standard is going to be. I think the same question applies to the side stepping of the building. Are we going to ask them to step the building back on the side property lines? Or can we find some way to keep it the way it is? In order to answer that, my first question, if I could, to the chair, through the chair, is to ask the staff, if the applicant chooses to go through our objective standard process, then the side stepping is required. Is that correct? So there's no option around that. If the applicant chooses to go through the conventional design review process within the CS zone, the side stepping is up to our judgment. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, so I've heard my colleagues, and I've struggled with this issue here and other places. My feeling is that this is the kind of project where we should allow the building to go straight up on the sides. I think it will be so detrimental to their program. I would much rather see them work hard to get the front both built to the setback, but also give us more stepping articulation, whatever we can see. And I think we owe it to the applicant to give them a clear answer which way we as a board will treat this if they come back to us through the standard architecture review process, so they can make a real judgment what they want to do. So I'm saying that to the chair, I guess. Do we want to try to give them a firm answer on that question? The side stepping and whether they have to build to the front back setbacks.
It seems to be that they have the option. They have an option, and they could decide how to proceed with that. I think we have.
I do think that we are in a preliminary stage. You know, we've talked about wanting to give projects clear direction early in the game because we don't want to get behind that ball later on, you know, where we come up with a better design later on. And it's harder for changes to be made the further down the road we go. So I do think the more direction we can give the applicant today, the better will be.
Yeah, if I can step in here, Board Member Balde, I appreciate the clarity you're trying to provide the applicant, and just on a personal answer, right? I can't really sort of speak beyond my own opinion on it, is that I do think it should be allowed to go straight up. However, I am not impressed with the balconies protruding into the side yards. So there's some of that where if we're going to allow a building to be straight up, my 2 cents on it would be that they should try and respect those setbacks top to bottom. So having a balcony that extrudes beyond the setbacks is something I'm not sure I would be viewing favorably in the future, since we would be allowing this building to not respect the setbacks to begin with. So I would say, sure, it can go straight up and down, but respect those setback lines would be my 2 cents on it.
What's yours?
Yeah, agree.
Yes, and I agree with that too.
If I can just clarify, there is no actual side setback in this particular zone.
The drawings
So-
are showing a 5 foot. Is that inaccurate?
Well, that might be something that they were trying to address. I think.
Okay.
I mean, we do ask for perimeter landscaping, things of that nature. Yeah, so they're showing 5 feet, but that's not a requirement. So I just,
Helpful is that if there's not a required setback, I think respecting some type of allowance for future daylight between the buildings is a very good idea. And I would strongly encourage respecting a 5 foot setback. Let me put it that way.
If I could, Jody, what is the setback required for our objective standards? Do we have something written in there for residential uses? I thought we did.
I would need to look that up.
Yeah, you know, I would like to comment on this now, because there are a significant number of units facing that side. If they don't have a setback, at least 5 feet, light and air is going to be a problem, and the plan is really going to be significantly changed. And although I understand your point about not having buildings that close to the neighbors, it appears that we don't know what's going to happen. We have no idea about the neighbor here. except that it's very, very likely, as we've been pointing out, that this is going to be a developed area very soon. So I think they've respected it, and yet the balconies are, I'm sort of changing my mind about that. I think it's nice to always be able to step out, but we don't know what's going to happen. So it's very hard for us to make a comment about that at this moment.
What I'm angling for us to do is to stipulate what setbacks would be required. If the applicant chooses to come back to the conventional ARB process and have the building analyzed under the CS zoning, they don't have a setback. We can tell them that if they want to most likely get our approval, they'll have to have a setback of some kind. Imagine yourselves being the architect designing a building and not knowing what the setback is going to be. Some arbitrary thing that ARB is going to tell us when we go for a hearing. That just seems outright unfair. And so they can choose to go with the objective standards and wait, do we have a setback with that?
I'm not finding anything at this point, so I don't believe there is.
So I mean, it's crazy to be sitting here saying this is what the setback will be. It's crazier still for them to be designing a building not knowing what the setback is going to be later. So I think we need to just decide on something and give them some guidelines. If they want to come back to us, let's say 5 feet. It has to be something. You can't have residential.
I
right to
think
the
that
sideline.
at the residential elements, it needs to be 5 feet. And that's all I'm going to stipulate for me. Again, it's a personal opinion. I think that 5 feet at a residential facility allows for air and light and ventilation. I won't necessarily hold that same standard for commercial, and I'll allow for the possibility that the building gets adjusted based on those.
Do you know, I'd like to add an element here. There are trees all along the north side of this property. If we knew somehow that those trees would have to be retained, because they are, after all, a beautiful stand of trees all the way along, I would think it would affect the next project that's going to be designed on that property. So there's a good chance that 5 feet will not only be sufficient, but there'll be plenty of light and air and a really nice view looking towards those trees.
But they're not going to be able to put this basement with those trees, David. They have a 10-foot excavation 2 feet from the line of trees. That's just not going to happen.
True.
And yet they're not going to get their underground parking if they pull the basement back another 10 feet. You can't have both.
The trees are actually not on this property. They're on the adjacent property.
Looking at the site plan, and I see a couple, the survey. I do remember other trees just on the neighbor's property. That's where the drive-through for the, is it Taco Bell or something comes along
Yeah.
that street there. And I would think landscaping is extremely desirable along that property boundary. They may need a greater setback than 5 feet. I'm not advocating for us to design the project, and that's what this veers towards doing, but I'm advocating for us to try to give them more clear, concrete guidance now. We keep saying we want them to come back to us with preliminary stuff. We want to be in on it earlier.
Mhm.
Well, the only way we can do that is by giving them concrete guidelines. Do this. And it's uncomfortable, but we don't have a code in place that governs this issue. And we have a situation where there's nothing else, nobody else is going to say it. So if we don't want to have something we don't like come back to us later, we need to give them more clear guidelines now. So what should the setback be? Should they save these trees? I vote for 5-foot setback, and I'm willing to lose some trees to let this building go in. I don't think if they have to preserve all these trees, the project won't work, in my opinion. But that's just me.
Could we have a consensus on that? You agree?
I would agree with that as well.
And I would too.
So the clear direction would be respect a 5-foot setback on the sides, and we're okay with the loss of those trees based on the fact that they will be providing significant underground parking.
And they'll have to replace the landscaping with something else. And we're not trying to give full answers. We're trying to give, Jody, does this make sense what we're trying to do?
Well, I'm hearing a 5-foot relief for the residential portion of the building. Are we okay with, are we wanting perimeter landscaping? Because that would be 5 feet for the entire building if we want perimeter landscaping.
Yeah, I feel like I muddied the waters here a little bit with my comment earlier. Ideally, 5-foot perimeter is what I would consider best. I allow for the possibility that if there's significant reason for something other than residential to be closer, I would be amenable to considering that, right? But I think that the 5-foot perimeter with full landscaping surround is sort of ideal, so.
Yeah, and I think for the applicant's benefit, I mean, this is not a 5-foot required setback. This is a design standard that the ARB is applying to a specific project. And so, yeah, so it's a soft 5 feet that they can, if they can make a case for something different, the ARB would be willing to listen to that.
That's well put. I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah, I think, all of this is an exchange. If they go through the objective standards, we get what we get. But they have to step the building back on the sides. And I think I've made the statement, I think I've heard from my colleagues that we're okay letting the building go up more or less straight, maybe be careful about the balconies going in, provide some relief on the north elevation, but keep it 5 feet back. So yes, there's always some adjustment there. We'll look at it, but we want to just give them some direction as you start to design the foundation and things like that.
Yes, I think it's pretty clear. And frankly, the front of the building, I think the applicant really understands the issue there. And they know there's going to be some significant changes in the front. So other than that, I think we pretty much come to an agreement on the building.
Yeah, and I do think on the front of the building, in that particular location, we're dealing with a development standard that is a hard line. You do have to meet that 50% build to line.
Yeah, and I've heard nobody on the board express a willingness to perhaps find a way around that either. So the applicant should just heed that very directly. Is there anything else, Jody, that you think would benefit from more clear direction from the board?
I think I can summarize a little bit. We heard about, if we're going to keep the trees at the rear property line, we need to make sure, get an arborist report, those sorts of things, make sure they're really going to be maintained. That goes for all trees.
Mhm.
There is extra parking being provided at this location. However, maybe that makes the retail more viable. I think the applicant can sort of make a case, one way or the other on that. If the applicant is going to provide shuttle service, though, we can also do a reduction in parking for that reason. So they may want to look into a TDM program if they want to reduce parking on the residential side. We'll look into, make sure fire and building have reviewed this, make sure that's all good. We talked about the balconies and setbacks. We talked about the build to line. Some concerns about viability of the retail. So the applicant will take a closer look at that. Bicycle parking came up, just the location of that, I think is correct. We want to make sure that seniors can get to all of these spaces. I was even sort of thinking that seniors might be riding the tricycle version, a three-wheeler. And so we need to maybe make some wider spaces to accommodate that. And maybe that's not every space, but at least a few. So I think that's most of what I had down. Emily, do you have anything else?
Yeah, we took notes on all of your comments related to the materials.
Yeah, that's what I would have sort of missing from the previous discussion is.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. A discussion about just having kind of warmer, more inviting colors, maybe not so dark.
Other than that, I think this is just one incredible program that we are looking forward to reviewing again. It would be quite exciting if you did bring it back to us to see it progress.
Do you want to hear if the applicant has any questions, David, for us?
Why not? Good idea.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to ask a few questions. Since we were discussing this setback, we just want to have some clarity or overall, if we are going to provide this side setback, would you for sure want it to go to the balconies, or can the balconies protrude in any way into the setback? The balconies are only located on the third and fourth floors. Sorry, some on the second floor, but it does mean that from grade, those balconies are going to be well over 20 feet, 25 feet from grade. So there will be quite a bit of space underneath the balconies, even if they protruded somewhat. And Athena, I want to also give you the opportunity. Were there any other questions that came up in your head too that you wanted to bring forward?
If I might jump in here regarding the balconies while you've asked that question. I think the issue, if I might speak for some of my fellow board members here, is not so much that it touches the ground, it's that we're allowing for light to pass by. So the fact that it's 25 feet in the air doesn't change the fact that it will prohibit light from entering down below. So the further you hold that back from the setback, regardless of how tall it is, you're going to get more light down the sides of the buildings and into those spaces. So I would love to hear from my board members if they have a firm answer on that, but I would just say the background of this is to really get more light into the building all the way down. So the fact that it's 25 feet up doesn't really change that fact. Board Member Chen, I can see you having an opinion here.
Yeah, totally agree. I think 5 feet setback is the minimum and no projections into that setback.
I agree with that.
David?
Yeah, well, I guess we go along with that idea. I frankly don't I don't see a problem with that decision. You know, the facade certainly will be just fine in that narrow space. You're not going to be so focused on, especially when a building is built next door. You're not going to be focused on that elevation so much. And so all of the moves that you are planning, sort of these projections that extend out, you know, nobody's really talked about that as an aesthetic idea here, whether it's a really good idea to have it projecting out further on this kind of rectangular building. Is that just something we would talk about?
I just think less than 5 feet for residential is too close. Somebody builds a building next door and their balconies also project, you can reach across and share the table salt. It's just too close.
Well, that's a
I
good
think
thing,
5
isn't
feet
it?
is 5 feet is already, and I would prefer 10 feet.
Well,
But,
I
don't
think
want to
we,
be writing code, especially from this position. We're just trying to give them guidance.
yes.
So I think 5 feet is an absolute, in my opinion, that's an absolute setback line.
Absolute. Okay. So I think we all agree about that.
Yeah,
Any other questions?
agreed. Any other questions from the applicant? And then Athena, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, I was just going to say, as we're having the discussion, if we provided sunshade angles to show how the balconies, you know, if we could show that that sunlight was still being, you know, allowed through sun angles, through, you know, Cartesian coordinates, if that would change anybody's mind.
Well, let me put this out there. You are allowed to present whatever you feel is best. And we're allowed to provide guidance on what we feel is best. So I think we're being pretty clear that 5 feet is what we would respect and that what we would expect. And if you feel that you have a design that can change our minds, you are welcome to present it, but there's no guarantee.
Got it.
I guess that's probably correct.
And will that 5 foot setback be also required from the neighboring properties as well?
That's a question for city council, and I'd really appreciate you asking them that. What is the code going to be when you build housing on San Antonio Road?
The code's already written for El Camino, which, you know, does allow a mix of uses. So I think that has already been factored in. I mean, is San Antonio, you know, does San Antonio need design guidelines is sort of a different question.
But isn't it 10 feet along El Camino for residential setbacks? I think it's more substantial than even what we're talking here. But okay, look,
Yeah, we'll take a look. We're not seeing it right now.
so that, we can't answer that question. I'm sorry. It is one of parity. I understand.
And it is a
Yeah.
good question.
But I think, if
But-
the applicant wanted to, certainly taking a look at our South El Camino guidelines and the related codes that go with that would give you a sense of how we've treated other buildings in the city.
And I think the reiteration here is also to remind the applicant that if they go by the standard design guidelines, there would be a stepping required. To avoid being required to step back, we're saying you can have a completely vertical facade. We're just asking it to be pulled in a little bit. So we're trying to meet in the middle. Does that make sense?
Well,
Okay.
residential use, is in a CS zone here. It seems to me would have to be treated differently than, especially the way this building is designed with all these units along the side. So I think that what we've said is pretty clear. 5 feet is minimal. I think we don't have to do anything at this point. So I think we can just say this, we're finished now with this project, and thank you very much for bringing the application to us.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Can we take just a 2-minute break?
My coffee cup is empty, Chair Hirsch. Can we take 5 minutes? David, can we take a 5-minute break?
5 minutes I can allow.
Thank you, David.
We back on? Okay. So now we have ARB bylaws changes, in the council handbook to discuss. Just how do we do this? Yeah, Jody will do that.
Yes, let me pull up my screen here, 1 second. Okay, just for I'm pulling up packet page 56, starting with packet page 56 for the public's information. And this is our second hearing on this. So it should be fairly easy. Board Member Thompson is not here today, but I did speak with her offline. She did not have any major questions or concerns, just so you have that knowledge. So starting on section 3.1, again on packet page 56, we did mark down that the chair and the vice chair, those positions would start in April of each year. And then the attorneys did write in here or on such date that coincides with the first meeting of a new board members, just so we don't have to change this in the future. 3.2, we just made sure and updated the department name. We also changed his, her to their, just to be more inclusive. On 3.31, we put in that the chair would be responsible for ensuring that the annual report / work plan is completed before the end of their term, which is March 31st.
So those would be combined then, right?
Yes, we talked about combining them, the look forward and the look back. We would combine them and it's, the chair doesn't have to do all the work, but just kind of has to make sure and push it forward. 3.32 is just the pronouns. 3.33, this is saying that the secretary, which is myself, would provide the board with early notification of pending projects that will require ARB review. And so that's what I've been putting in the city official reports, and this will just make sure that that carries on. And then packet page 58. We did put in the language about the pre-meeting that we have, just that the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary meet a few days ahead of each public hearing to go over the agenda. And the chair and the vice chair are able to submit early questions to staff that will be answered at the hearing. And that's a non-quorum, so it's not a public noticed meeting. And I need to fill in the dates at the bottom, and that's about it. So if I could if there's any questions, or if I could get a vote on that, on the bylaws changes, that would be wonderful.
Okay, let's have a vote.
I had one small procedural change.
Yep.
On section 6.1 regarding the meeting in advance for the chair and vice chair, could we strike the words "a few days" and just say the chair, vice chair, and secretary shall meet ahead of each public hearing rather than stipulate a few days ahead? Maybe it's just me, but a few days just sounds informal. And it has no legal merit. So that's the only change I have.
Yeah, it would have to be between, when the packet's printed and the hearing. So it is pretty obvious when it has to happen. So not a big deal.
Okay. Okay with you? Make the change? Jody?
Yes, I have marked the change, assuming everyone agrees. Silence is agreement.
Silence is agreement in this case.
And then to the chair, a broader discussion we've been having over the past few months is whether we wanted to incorporate in the bylaws a greater level of requirement or involvement for the Architecture Review Board. And I had hoped to have that discussion with Board Member Thompson here as well. However, unless somebody else wants to bring that up, I'm happy to let that drop for now and move to approve these minutes. But I wanted David to hear your thoughts on it, or see if you wanted to pursue it.
You and I have been talking about this for couple of months now.
Yeah.
And I think we personally are both in agreement, but if anybody else would like to chime in on this at this point, we could. Is this something, however, that goes into this piece of our regulation? Or is it a scope of work that we include in the description of what we do, such as the findings? We put something in the findings, that might be a better place for that.
Yes, all those are correct, and it's not at all clear that the bylaws are where you would incorporate this kind of thing. The findings are encapsulated in city ordinance, and it's not easily changed. And the council just went through a review process of that a few years ago. So I don't know where a better place is for this, and that's
Yeah.
why I'm not willing or really eager to push it right now. But
Right.
it is something we've been talking about. Right now, the only change we've really made is that we've asked staff to formalize providing us with this updated list. And I guess that's progress, so I'm happy to take it at that myself.
Yeah, no, I think this sort of cleans up this piece of the document here. But where to put that idea is something we're going to have to work on probably throughout the year.
So with that, I'm happy to make a motion that we approve these bylaw changes as presented, with the one change in section 6.1 to strike the words a few days before.
Second that.
Okay, shall we take a vote on that?
Vice Chair Baltai,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Rosenberg,
Yes.
motion carries 4-0.
So that's it for the changes, actually, Jody, is that correct?
Yes.
Um, I had some comment here. It says under Architectural Review Board procedures and rules that a 2/3 vote is required for a couple of things. Previous questions close the debate or called to question, and the limit, this is, by the way, on packet page 67. Limits of debate. And so we're 5 people. The mathematics doesn't work out on that. So, Jody, do you see what I'm talking about? No? 2/3 vote is required.
You're on packet page 67?
7, yeah.
Why am I missing it? What line are we on?
2/3 vote on the very top corner.
No, oh, 2/3 vote.
It's 2/3 vote, and I guess technically the mathematics is that 3/5 is less than 2/3. Is that it's 0.6 versus 0.66667?
Do you
So,
care?
Mathematically.
Mathematically, we
It's a little
can't
inaccurate,
do
but-
that.
Depends on the size of your quorum, gang,
Correct.
too.
So if it's, maybe that should just be majority vote.
These are rules that come out of Robert's Rules of Order modified for the whole city, and I don't think we want to get into adjusting them
Mathematics
in more
can-
detail.
Yeah.
The idea is to
Semantics.
protect the minority
Yeah.
in the issues of closing out discussion. So I support something, and I don't support micro adjusting it for us,
Okay.
myself.
I'm glad to know you read them, though. Yeah, I can get some clarification from the attorney's office just to make sure.
Just to see what happens if that were to come up.
Yeah, certainly.
So, Peter, maybe we should have a little discussion about whether or not our findings should be changed in some way, and that we have to make that proposal that it change. I was sort of thinking that we've been asked to do the objective study, which means we're involved in zoning.
Don't
And yet our findings don't specifically say were to be involved in zoning. It does for the PTC. So, I was looking at PTC's requirements, findings requirements, and there's some overlap here. And it's certainly conceivable that we could request further discussion about that from the city in some way and bring it up as an issue. And Jody, what do you think?
So I'm sorry, I missed the first little bit, Board Member Valte, about the topic of discussion. Sorry, what was your intro to this discussion? Are we talking about the preliminary reviews? What are we talking about?
I had asked if we wanted to consider putting stronger language in our bylaws regarding our desire to be more involved in reviewing projects earlier on. In other words, requesting that we actually have preliminary reviews internally with the staff in advance of a project, well in advance of a project, before the application is deemed complete, that kind of thing. And that's a thorny ground, rocky ground to go over. And so I don't think we have consensus on the board of what to do. That's why I'm backing off of that.
Okay, so you're talking about so we have preliminary reviews, which is, what we just did earlier today, which is a formal process. But we also have, just taking this San Antonio project as an example, they came in for a prelim. That preliminary process is optional. And then next they'll come in for a formal process, which is required. But are you talking about the first hearing that happens in a formal process?
Actually, not quite. What I've always advocated for would be something different. It could have been incorporated in section 6.1. But let me first say, I thought we just voted on this issue and we're done. So are we okay to discuss it more like this?
I think we're, yes. I mean, we need to be careful that we're not making any decisions because we're sort of going off on a little bit on a tangent on something that's not on the agenda. But I think we're fine to just, if we're describing a project that will be on a later agenda, that would be helpful to staff.
I would advocate to have under section 6.1, the chair, vice chair, and secretary shall meet a few days of the meeting. One of the purposes of that meeting is to review projects that are not yet deemed complete, but it will be coming to the Architecture Review Board for preliminary bureaucratic, procedural feedback on the completeness of the application, to give the applicant more feedback earlier on in the process. That's something that I feel would be a good idea. I say that with a very strong caveat that I don't think I have the support of the board for that idea.
Well,
And so I really don't want to push harder than what the board as a whole wants to do.
well,
I know Board Member Thompson has strongly expressed a desire not to do that. And so that's why I just want to be very careful what I'm saying here.
And I think there's, the reason that we started the list of projects is so that the full board has that list of projects that are going to come to you in the future. I do think it's probably better that if there were questions to bring that up during the city official report so that all the board hears it, all the public hears it, things of that nature. It would be a one-way conversation. It's just sort of you saying, here's my concerns about this project, or here's what I want to see. But staff would certainly receive that type of information.
That was the consensus where we left it when we last discussed it. So.
yes, and I mean, the purpose of this summary of projects that, matter of fact, we could state it that it turned out that in the discussions with the mayor and the vice mayor, that turned out to be a very interesting piece of discussion.
I'll bring that up when I discuss it.
So we could identify projects that we think are significant for that kind of early discussion. And not just that they're projects that are already scheduled for our review, but projects that, as we look towards the future, are significant projects that we need to think about in a more creative way as an organization here. And our input could be significant. For example, this whole issue of San Antonio Road and the whole plan that the council has now decided on, which is an increase in the density of that whole area. It's a very significant move for the city. And it's something which we might participate in to a greater degree. I think we could all agree that it's going to be very significant, as much as we have done this in the past. So for example, El Camino Real guidelines. So we need to have that, and it's come up here several times in our discussion today. You know, that San Antonio Road should have some guidelines. And we should be participating in that. Planning and transportation obviously should be very involved. To some extent, I think that we have to coordinate with them. Planning and transportation, they're essential to think ahead on this. It would surprise me if they're not willing to do that as well. So how do we get to that point? You know, now, I don't know what the bureaucracy will allow, but I think it's an important, very important part. And certainly it's what I was intending to do with this very idea of presenting all the projects that are coming here, which is, Jody, you've done just a wonderful job on that. And I think it's really, really significant. So that's my general statement, but how to get this to happen is really the next step. And I'd like to say, I think that, you know, as we're talking about this today, we can get some general opinion from our board as to what the others here who are hearing this, maybe not for the first time, but in the broader expression of what we need to be thinking about as we, the board, look to be participants in this future development of Palo Alto.
All well said. The bylaws are what we were just focused on voting on, and we just did. So probably best though, David, not to drag out the bylaw issue on our agenda with this.
Yeah, just to finish up though on the San Antonio corridor, I do have a quick response from the director, just saying that, you know, council is aware of the issue. Council has directed staff to work on such a thing. And staff is currently looking at, you know, our staffing levels and our workload to see where that can be worked in. So, but do, you know, please continue to push the idea with staff, with council, to make sure that gets started. And we would certainly include the ARB in any such event.
Okay. Okay, so maybe we would find a way to make our presentation to planning in general, that we're interested and want to be participants in the process. What do you think to that idea?
Yes, of course. I think we're interested and want to be involved in the process, certainly around San Antonio Road. I think I'm becoming increasingly uncomfortable, David, that we're having a discussion that's not on our agenda.
Okay, we can finish with.
I think we really need to
really sort of
agendize that. We need to do our minute or approve the minutes from the previous meeting, the next item.
Okay.
So you want to call that item up, David, the next agenda item?
Yes, I'm just getting up to the minutes here. Medina, we didn't get tabs on this one.
Oh, it's your fault, Medina, that we're floundering up here.
Okay, so I have to find my way back to the first meeting here. So their first meeting is August 18th, draft architectural review board meeting minutes for August 18th, 2022. Any comments about the minutes? Any changes?
Well, on page 95, I made a motion as presented with 2 conditions, and I listed 3. Sadly, I believe that's probably all accurate, what's written there, so no changes. On
Okay.
page 95, it explains the motion I made. And it says I recommended the approval with 2 conditions. And there are 3 conditions listed in that motion, which is what we approved. And so I don't think we can change it unless somebody else remembers otherwise. And
I think
it
we'll
really
just
matters.
forgive you.
So with that, I can move to approve these minutes as presented.
Second that? Anybody?
Vice Chair Bautay,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Rosenberg.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
So ad hoc committee review on Ken Hayes project. Want to report on that?
Oh, Jody, do we usually vote on the
We
ad
don't
hoc?
vote on those.
Yeah, no, those are part of the minutes. We do it all as one.
Yeah, I was assuming my motion intended to encompass all of that.
Okay.
So, if we go on to the next item, Chair Hirsch, I'd like to present a brief report of what happened at this meeting I attended earlier this week.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, so to my colleagues, the Mayor Burt and Vice Mayor Koo held a meeting for the chairs of the various boards and commissions in town. As Dave Hirsch was out of town, I attended that meeting in his stead. So I thought I would just quickly outline what was covered at that meeting, just so we're all aware of it. I'll try not to go on too long, but at the beginning of the meeting, Mayor Burt outlined various major items the council has done or is working on over the year. The first item was the business tax, which has now been put on the ballot. It was a result of a negotiation between several board members in the business community. They now feel they have a business tax that may not be as much income as they like, but it's more likely to pass. They directed that those funds would be provided for, he listed 3 things, low-income housing fund, transportation for grade separation projects. They mentioned that if the city can provide a small percentage of those things up front, there's a large amount of federal funding available and state funding, so they wanted to leverage it. Unfortunately, my pen wasn't fast enough to catch the third item that he mentioned for their funding. So it's blank here on my page. The third thing is that the city council has approved and endorses the Life Moves transitional shelter to be built at the end of San Antonio Road, and the city did receive the $26 million grant to build that, so it's moving forward. The fourth item was that there's a gas transfer tax being proposed for the ballot, which will bring in an estimated $4 million a year. I don't understand the mechanism of how it works, but the $4 million a year I heard. Of more interest to the ARB, Vice Mayor Koo and Councilmember Dubois negotiated as a team for the council with Sobrato, the organization who owns the Fry's site over in the Ventura area. And they had a very constructive negotiation, they felt, and reached an informal agreement, which she outlined to us. So I'll share with you that they would allow Sobrato to build a housing project on Park Boulevard that would be fairly dense and include lots of family housing. I asked for specifics on how dense, and there was no response given. That will also allow that the existing large warehouse that used to house Fry's Electronics, amongst other buildings, will remain in place and would be repurposed as some sort of commercial uses. What they said was that there's quite a bit of contention over what's currently allowed, and the city didn't want to fight that more. In addition, Palo Alto will get a grant of 3.5 acres of land. 2.5 will be provided for a new park. 1 acre will be given for the city to develop for housing. Vice Mayor Koo said that would be developed as deeper affordable income housing, meaning people who are more in need would get that housing. Lastly, Vice Mayor Koo said that there will be some sort of coffee shop with a historic presentation or approach to memorialize the original use of that warehouse building, which was for the cannery in Palo Alto, long before Fry's was there. Mayor Burt brought up that Catholic Charities has bought the Mike's Bike Shop site on El Camino from Sobrato, and they intend to use that for very, very low income housing. And then Vice Mayor Koo mentioned that she has heard over and over from the public that the housing we need is family housing. And she wanted that put out there. They presented the climate plan updates. They have a community group working very hard on trying to clarify what's going on. The plan is to have 80% of Palo Alto be an 80% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2030. So not 100%, but 80%. And the mayor reinforced to us that Palo Alto is 100% carbon free in the electric production that we use, as compared to, and we're 2/3 the cost of PG&E. What was very interesting was they talked about the utilities dealing with this increased electrification in the town. And what they said is that they've realized that the utility grid is being highly stressed because we're using more electricity and less gas. And they feel that it's not because of the increased load of electrification on buildings for, say, hot water heater pumps or air conditioning and electric heat pump furnaces, but rather it's from electric vehicle charging. And the utilities feels that electrical vehicle charging is causing a tremendous overload on the grid. And then they mentioned they were just very surprised to find that transformers becoming overloaded because there's 3 or 4 people on the street have put in EV chargers. Each one pulls 50 amps and pop, there goes the breaker. The mayor said he thinks the answer, or he suggested one solution might be to get slower charging. In other words, not level 2 chargers, which probably is not very popular, but that's just politicizing. The last thing they mentioned is that they have a new police chief in town, and they're very happy about that. We then went around the table and the various board members made some comments about what they did. Utilities talked again about the increasing demands on the electric grid. They also talked about the fiber communication system, and they're unsure whether they should try to develop that as Palo Alto or as private utilities coming in to do it. And then she expressed concern about sea level rise and how that might affect the city without any strong answer. The chair of the Historic Resources Board was there, expressed concern about staffing levels to help them do their work on their projects, but didn't have anything beyond that. The stormwater management chair was there and made a very strong statement that the stormwater fund is being properly used. And felt that was the only thing they had to really focus on there. The Parks and Recreation people reported that the Mayfield North Field is going to be repaired soon. They're balancing uses. The Cubberley Gym is out of service, and Mitchell Park Dog Park is going to be expanded. So it's just a run-of-the-mill update from everybody. Lastly, I spoke on behalf of the Architecture Review Board, and I presented 4 things that I thought were of interest. One was I reinforced that we've been asking for, and it's now becoming obvious that we need a better long-range plan for San Antonio Road. We've talked about that quite a bit today. I said that directly to the mayor. He acknowledged the need for that. At the same breath, he said, look, he was involved in the plan for the South of Forest project here in Palo Alto some 15, 20 years ago, and it was a rather contentious process. He felt that, yes, we needed to come up with a new guideline for San Antonio, but we had to think of a good process to get there. So I think it is on their radar, but it's not clear to me how serious they're taking it or what they're going to do. The second thing I mentioned to them is that we have new objective standards in place, and yet I think the consensus of the architecture board is that we're pretty unclear how they're going to work. What I said is that I think they should be reviewing these standards, or we should be reviewing them in a formal way at least every year, just to check how they go against what's really being approved. So I just put that out there. I did mention that we have our Architecture Review Board award ceremony coming up and asked the council members to attend. And then lastly, I mentioned to them this list we've been preparing recently of upcoming projects, and that was quite positively received by both the mayor and the city council, but also other review boards who all wanted to get their hands on our list. So I think it really reinforced when I was explaining that we have this list now of upcoming projects looking far into the future. Everybody's ears perked up, and it struck me that really this is a good thing. And so maybe it's a good wake-up call for staff too, that people want to know what you guys have in your pockets over there ahead of time. So I think the planning people and the historic resources people would really want to see that list as well. That's not for us to dictate, but I'm just saying that's what I said at this meeting. So that's I hope a quick synopsis of what we discussed. It was a positive meeting, I felt. If there's any questions, I can answer them, but otherwise that's it. Thank you.
Excellent, Peter. Actually, I did respond from New York. I wrote a piece on my last day, which is the same day of the meeting, but it's New York time, so I was able to get it out. I hope that Leslie Minton was able to present it to the board, and it's pretty much parallels what Peter has just said. Because my concern was that San Antonio Road is really critical, and that we should be a part of all of that, and hope that we can be included in some way. And there was one other item, I can't remember what it was exactly, but I want to just reinforce the fact that the objective standards, actually, Xingqi and I have been working on it, but I was unable to. Xingqi has written up something for our earliest discussions, and we've been at it for several days, several meetings that we've had. And so then we'll have to decide just exactly how we bring all of this back to the board to discuss it item by item. But I will say that because we really found the Bayshore project to be such a issue, when we looked at it, the housing issue there, I developed a scheme and we discussed it briefly, but I'm going to talk to Jody about it today with the thought that that kind of development is really larger than materiality. There are more issues. So I'm just going to bring you up to date that this is something that we'll talk to Jody. We have a date after the meeting today to discuss it. And we'll see how that develops as to whether it's something that let's just wait and see what Jody has to say. So with that, I think the meeting, you have a comment?
If I have one quick announcement, is just a gentle reminder that next week on the 21st is our ARB Design Award ceremony.
Right.
And if the board members could please finalize their introductory blurbs, focusing on why this project was selected. We are wrap those up by tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, it's been a while, guys. You've had a minute here, so we're going to say by tomorrow.
Okay.
If you would be so kind, and then to send them to Jody and to Amy.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
You okay with that? Yeah. All right. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, David.